This excerpt is from Richard Foster's The Agony. English football has held its current exalted position for many years, consistently attracting a galaxy of international talent playing in front of packed stadia. The Premier League has built a reputation for providing the most exciting, as opposed to the most technically gifted or skillful, football of any domestic league globally. There is an almost insatiable appetite for English football as people follow it on every continent and broadcasters duly vie to get in on the action. Watched by a global audience of nearly 5 billion people, including 300 million in China alone, and across 212 countries, the omnipresence of the Premier League shows no sign of relenting. It is hard to imagine, but important to appreciate, the contrast with the parlous state of the game 3 decades beforehand. Another important consideration is the sheer range of clubs that have been involved and affected by the playoffs, from poorest to richest, from smallest to largest. One needs to look no further than the wealthiest club in Britain and the 2012 and 2014 Premier League champions, Manchester City, to judge how far and wide this influence stretches. To dramatically late goals rescuing Manchester City sounds distinctly familiar. Their 2012 triumph against QPR has strong parallels with their 1999 playoffs victory against Gillingham. Although the climax to the 2011-12 Premiership season did mark a historic moment in the club's history, 44 years after they last won the top division, maybe the more significant match for City took place 13 years before. Switch from the 13th of May 2012 at the Etihad Stadium to Wembley on the 30th of May 1999. As the Football League Second Division playoffs final is about to enter the final minute, Gillingham are getting ready to celebrate promotion to the second tier of English football for the first time in their history. After scoring 2 goals in the previous 10 minutes, the Kent club seemed to have timed their surge to victory to perfection. Their illustrious opponents, Manchester City, looked to be consigned to a further year in the Football League Second Division, having just spent their first, uncomfortable season in the third tier of league football, and obscurity beckons. The level could have been ruined across the recent history of large clubs struggling to regain their match, and many City fans headed for the exits, resigned to their fate and not wishing to witness the dying embers of the match. Until the 5th minute of added time that Paul Dickoff scored a second, a barely credible equalizer past Bartram. Not only was this a poignant moment for both men, Dickoff missed his spot kick after a goalless extra time to cap an amazing climax, and the club were back on the rise to the upper reaches of the league. Arguably, this amazing transformation of fortune in being promoted that year could have set City back for a while, if not terminally. The one that turned everything around for the club, and Dickoff is still revered because of his goal. Another club from Manchester had scored 2 equally implausibly late goals to win the champ. During that there was at least some sharing of the glory. Although crawling out of the third tier of football may not have come close to winning the treble in terms of level of achievement or kudos, it was as important in the development of City, and arresting the slits and the penalty shootout were not dramatic enough. There were further twists to this incredible match, which came to light after the final. Firstly, the perpetually controversial Gillingham chairman, Paul Scally, demanded a replay when the referee, Mark Halsey, was spotted enjoying a drink with City fans in a nearby hotel after the game. This desperate appeal was summarily rejected, but was just the start of more off-the-field revelations surrounding the match. The crushing disappointment felt by the Gillingham camp after their first trip to Wembley had been somewhat mitigated by their chairman. Scally was found guilty of placing bets on his own team by an FA commission in 2005 and fined the not inconsiderable sum of £10,000. One of those bets was on Gillingham to be beaten in that playoffs final, so Scally had found a convenient, but illegal, way of cushioning the blow. To add fuel to the fire, Scally also sacked his manager, Tony Pulis, for gross misconduct in the aftermath of the final, which initiated a long-running legal feud between Pulis and Scally with a series of claims and counterclaims. Eventually Pulis settled out of court for £75,000, but the rancor still rumbles on 15 years later. Pulis and Scally had been on such bad terms in the build-up to the final that they hardly spoke to each other, and the lid was finally blown off the smoldering cauldron in the days after the final. This excerpt is from Richard Foster's The Agony.